And here we are. And I'm gonna zoom in, and here we are. This story is called The Magic Barrel. It's written by Bernard Malamud, and it's the title story of a collection of his short stories. And many of us, I hope, have heard of him. He was a very, very well-recognized and appreciated and admired American Jewish writer. And he wrote a bunch of novels and many short stories. So this is still continuing on our marriage theme that we had for the last few weeks. So here we go. Who would like to help us out today with reading it?
I will.
Okay. Go ahead, Carol. It's all yours.
And I don't even need my cheaters. Thank you for having it this large. Not long ago, there lived in uptown New York a small, almost meager room. Though crowded with books, Leo Finkel, a rabbinical student in the Yeshiva University. Finkel, after 6 years of study, was to be ordained in June and had been advised by an acquaintance that he might find it easier to win himself a congregation if he were married. Since he had no present prospects of marriage, after 2 tormented days of turning it over in his mind, he called in Pinchas Salzman, a marriage broker, whose 2-line advertisement he had seen in the forward. The matchmaker appeared one night out of the dark 4th-floor hallway of the gray stone rooming house where Finkel lived, grasping a black strapped portfolio that had been worn thin with use. Salzman, who had been long in the business, was of slight but dignified build, wearing an old hat and an overcoat too short and tight for him. He smelled, frankly, of fish, which he loved to eat, and although he was missing a few teeth, his presence was not displeasing, because an amicable manner curiously contrasted with mournful eyes. His voice, his lips, his wisp of beard, his bony fingers were animated, but give him a moment of repose, and his mild blue eyes revealed a deep sadness, a characteristic that put Leo a little at ease, although the situation for him was inherently tense. He at once informed Salzman why he had asked him to come, explaining that his home was in Cleveland and that but for his parents, who had married comparatively late in life, he was alone in the world. He had for 6 years devoted himself almost entirely to his studies, and as a result of which, understandably, he had found himself without time for a social life and the company of young women. Therefore, he thought it the better part of trial and error, of embarrassing fumbling, to call in an experienced person to advise him on these matters. He remarked in passing that the function of the marriage broker was ancient and honorable, highly approved in the Jewish community, because it made practical the necessary without hindering joy. Moreover, his own parents had been brought together by a matchmaker. They had made, if not a financially profitable marriage, since neither had possessed any worldly goods to speak of, at least a successful one in the sense that their ever-loving devotion to each other. Salzman listened in embarrassed surprise, sensing a sort of apology. Later, however, he experienced a glow of pride in his work, an emotion that had left him years ago, and he heartily approved of Finkel. The two went to their business. Leo had led Salzman to the only clear place in the room, a table near a window that overlooked a lamp-lit city. He seated himself at the matchmaker's side, but facing him, attempting by an act of will to suppress the unpleasant tickle in his throat. Salzman eagerly unstrapped his portfolio and removed a loose rubber band from a thin packet of much-handled cards. As he flipped through them, a gesture and sound that physically hurt Leo, the student pretended not to see and gazed steadfastly out the window. Although it was still February, winter was on its last legs. signs of which he had for the first time in years begun to notice. He now observed the round white moon moving high in the sky through a cloud menagerie and watched with half-open mouth as it penetrated a huge hen and dropped out of her like an egg laying itself. Salzman, though pretending through eyeglasses he had just slipped on to be engaged in scanning the writing on the cards, stole occasional glances at the young man's distinguished face, noting with pleasure the long, severe scholar's nose, brown eyes, heavy with learning, sensitive yet ascetic lips, and a certain almost hollow quality of the dark cheeks. He gazed around at shelves upon shelves of books and let out a soft, contented sigh. When Leo's eyes fell upon the cards, he counted 6 spread out in Salzman's hand. So few, he asked in disappointment. You wouldn't believe me how much cards I got in my office, Salzman replied. The drawers are already filled to the top, so I keep them now in a barrel. But is every girl good for a new rabbi? Leo blushed at this, regretting all he had revealed of himself in a curricula vitae he had sent to Salzman. He had thought it best to acquaint him with his strict standards and specifications, but in having done so, he felt he had told the marriage broker more than was absolutely necessary. He hesitantly inquired, Do you keep photographs of clients on file? First comes family, amount of dowry, also what kind of promises. Could you move it over slightly?
Which way?
Towards the left.
That's as much as it's going to go.
Okay, because I wasn't sure I saw it. First comes family, amount of dowry, also what kind promises, Salzman replied, unbuttoning his tight coat and settling himself in the chair. After come pictures, Rabbi. Call me Mr. Finkel. I'm not yet a rabbi. Salzman said he would, but instead called him doctor, which he changed to rabbi when Leo was not listening to attentively. Salzman adjusted his horn-rimmed spectacles, gently cleared his throat, and read in an eager voice the contents of the top card. Sophie P., 24 years, widow 1 year, no children, educated high school and 2 years college. Father promises $8,000, has wonderful wholesale business, also real estate. On the mother's side comes teachers, also one actor, well known on 2nd Avenue. Leo gazed up in surprise. Did you say a widow? A widow doesn't mean spoiled, Rabbi. She lived with her husband maybe 4 months. He was a sick boy. She made a mistake to marry him. Marrying a widow has never entered my mind. This is because you have no experience. A widow, especially if she is young and healthy like this girl, is a wonderful person to marry. She will be thankful to you the rest of her life. Believe me, if I was looking now for a bride, I would marry a widow. Leo reflected, then shook his head. Salzman hunched his shoulders in an almost imperceptible gesture of disappointment. He placed the card down on the wooden table and began to read another. Lily H., high school teacher, regular, not a substitute, has savings and a new Dodge car. Lived in Paris 1 year. Father is successful dentist, 35 years. Interested in professional man. Well Americanized family. Wonderful opportunity. I knew her personally, said Salzman. I wish you could see the girl. She is a doll. Also very intelligent. All day you could talk to her about books and the theater and whatnot.
Theater, come on.
Theater, and the theater and whatnot. She also knows current events. I don't believe you mentioned her age. Her age? Her age is 32 years. Leo said after a while, I'm afraid that seems a little too old. Salzman let out a laugh. How old are you, Rabbi? "27. So what is the difference, tell me, between 27 and 32? My own wife is 7 years older than me. So what did I suffer? Nothing. If Rothschild's a daughter wants to marry you, would you say on account of her age, no? Yes, Leo said dryly. Salzman shook off the no in the yes. 5 years don't mean a thing. I give you my word that when you will live with her for 1 week, you will forget her age. What does it mean, 5 years? That she lived more and knows more than somebody who is younger? On this girl, God bless her, years are not wasted. Each one that comes makes better the bargain. What subject does she teach in high school? Languages. If you heard the way she speaks French, you will think it is music. I am in the business 25 years and I recommend her with my whole heart. Believe me, I know what I'm talking, Rabbi. What's on the next card? Leo said abruptly. Salzman reluctantly turned up the third card. Ruth K., 19 years, honest student. Father offers 13,000 cash to the right bridegroom. He is a medical doctor, stomach specialist with marvelous practice. Brother-in-law owns garment business. Particular people. Salzman, as if he had read the card, read his trump card. Did you say 19? Leo asked with interest. On the dot. Is she attractive? He blushed. Pretty? Salzman kissed his fingertips. A little doll. On this I give you my word. Let me call the father tonight and you will see what pretty means.
No. You will see what means pretty. Let's keep the characteristic way that he speaks.
Okay. Let me call the father tonight and you will see what means pretty. But Leo was troubled. You're sure she's that young? This I am positive. The father will show you the birth certificate. Are you positive there isn't something wrong with her? Leo insisted. Who says there is wrong? I don't understand why an American girl her age should go to a marriage broker. A smile spread over Salzman's face. So for the same reason you went, she comes. Leo flushed. I am pressed for time. Salzman, realizing he had been tactless, quickly explained. The father came, not her. He wants she should have the best, so he looks around himself. When we will locate the right boy, he will introduce him. And encourage. This makes a better marriage than if a girl with experience takes for herself. I can't see the word no, with no experience takes for herself. I don't have to tell you this, but don't you think this young girl believes in love? Leo spoke easily. Salzman was about to guffaw, but caught himself and said soberly, love comes with the right person, not before. Leo parted dry lips, but did not speak. Noticing that Salzman had snatched a glance at the next card, he cleverly asked, how is her health? Perfect, Salzman said, breathing with difficulty. Of course, she is a little lame on her right foot from an auto accident that had happened to her when she was 12 years. But nobody notices on account she is brilliant.
So brilliant. I'm going to make this a tiny bit smaller. How's that? Can you see it now?
Okay. It's still not, can you move it over some more?
No.
Then I'll take it, okay. Ah, you had it. She is a little,
Go ahead.
but nobody notices on account she is so brilliant and also beautiful. Leo got up heavily and went to the window. Furiously, he.
No.
Furiously, he felt curiously by something.
Bitter.
He felt curiously bitter and upbraided himself for having called in the marriage broker. Finally, he shook his head. Why not? Salzman persisted, the pitch of his voice rising.
Hold on. Yeah.
Okay. because I detest stomach specialists. So what do you care what is his business? After you marry her, do you need him? Who says he must come every Friday night to your house? Ashamed of the way the talk was going, Leo dismissed Salzman, who went home with heavy, melancholy eyes. Though he had felt only relief at the marriage broker's departing, Leo was in low spirits the next day. He explained it as a rising from
Carol, try this. I'm going to make a suggestion. Try closing all the windows of everybody and see if you get a bigger.
Actually, Rabbi, if you squeeze the window down a little smaller, it's an aspect ratio thing. Just make your window a little narrower, Rabbi.
How's that?
And then scoot over once you've made it narrower.
It won't go any further over.
Horizontal scroll
There.
at the bottom.
There, how's that?
Okay, okay, John, how do I
What don't you see?
I don't see the last few words on the right side. John, how do I get rid of the listing of people?
You can't get rid of it, I don't think, but if you put your mouse between the book and the listing of people, you should get a little different icon that lets you slide your pane left and right.
Hide thumbnail video? Oh, okay.
You
I got
click
rid
and
of it.
hold down, you can slide left and right and increase or decrease.
I can see the whole thing, but I can't see the participating people, so.
All right.
Okay. Ashamed of the way the talk was going, Leo dismissed Salzman, who went home with heavy, melancholy eyes. Though he had felt only relief at the marriage broker's departure, Leo was in low spirits the next day. He explained it as arising from Salzman's failure to produce a suitable bride for him. He did not care for his type of clientele. But when Leo found himself hesitating whether to seek out another matchmaker or matchmaker, one more polished than Pinier, he wondered if it could be his protestations to the contrary. And although he honored his father and mother, that he did not, in essence, care for the matchmaking institution. This thought he quickly put out of mind, yet found himself still upset. All day he ran around in the woods, missed an important appointment, forgot to give out his laundry, walked out of a Broadway cafeteria without paying, and had to run back with the ticket in his hand. Had even not recognized his landlady in the street when she passed with a friend and courteously called out, "A good evening to you, Dr. Finkel." By nightfall, however, he had regained sufficient calm to sink his nose into a book and there found peace from his thoughts. Almost at once, there came a knock on the door. Before Leo could say enter, Salzman, commercial Cupid, was standing in the room. His face was gray and meager, his expression hungry, and he looked as if he would expire on his feet. Yet the marriage broker managed, by some trick of muscle, to display a broad smile. "So good evening, am I invited?" Leo nodded, disturbed to see him again, yet unwilling to ask the man to leave. Beaming still, Salzman laid his portfolio on the table. "Rabbi, I got for you tonight good news. I asked you not to call me Rabbi. I'm still a student. Your worries are finished. I have for you a first-class bride. Leave me in peace concerning this subject." Leo pretended lack of interest. "The world will dance at your wedding. Please, Mr. Salzman, no more. But first must come back my strength," Salzman said weakly. He fumbled with the portfolio straps and took out the leather case, an oily paper bag from which he extracted a hard, seeded roll and a small smoked whitefish. With a quick motion of his hand, he stripped the fish out of its skin and began ravenously to chew. "All day in a rush," he muttered. Leo watched him eat. "A sliced tomato you have maybe?" Salzman hesitantly inquired. "No." The marriage broker shut his eyes and ate. When he had finished, he carefully cleaned up the crumbs and rolled up the remains of the fish in the paper bag. His speckled eyes roamed the room until he discovered amid some piles of books one burner gas stove. Lifting his hat, he humbly asked, a glass tea you got, Rabbi? Conscience-stricken, Leo rose and brewed the tea. He served it with a chunk of lemon and 2 cubes of lump sugar, delighting Salzman. After he had drunk his tea, Salzman's strength and good spirits were restored. So tell me, Rabbi, he said amicably, amably, you considered some more the 3 clients I mentioned yesterday? There was no need to consider. Why not? None of them suits me. Then what suits you? Leo let it pass because he could give only a confused answer. Without waiting for a reply, Salzman asked, you remember this girl I talked to you, the high school teacher? Age 32, but surprisingly, Salzman's face lit in a smile. Age 29. Leo shot him a look. Reduced from 32? A mistake, Salzman avowed. I talked today with the dentist. He took me to his safe deposit box and showed me the birth certificate. She was 29 years last August. They made her a party in the mountains where she went for her vacation. When her father spoke to me the first time, I forgot to write the age and I told you 32. But now I remember this was a different client, a widow. The same one you told me about? I thought she was 24. A different. Am I responsible that the world is filled with widows? No, but I'm not interested in them, nor for that matter in school teachers. Salzman pulled his clasped hands to his breast. Looking at the ceiling, he devoutly exclaimed, Yiddische Kinder.
Yiddische Kinder.
Yiddische Kinder. What can I say to someone that is not interested in high school teachers? So what then are you interested? Leo flushed but controlled himself. In what else would you be interested, Salzman went on, if you are not interested in this fine girl, that she speaks 4 languages and has personally in the bank $10,000? Also, her father guarantees further $12,000. Also, she has a new car, wonderful clothes, talks on all subjects, and she will give you a first-class home and children. How near do we come in our life to paradise? If she's so wonderful, why hasn't she married 10 years ago? Why? Salzman with a heavy laugh. Why? Because she's a particular. This is why. She wants the best. Leo was silent, amused at how he had entangled himself. But Salzman had aroused his interest in Lily H., and he began seriously to consider calling her. When the marriage broker observed how intently Leo's mind was working on the facts he had supplied, he felt certain they would soon come to an arrangement. Late Saturday afternoon, conscious of Salzman, Leo Finkel walked with Lily Hershon along Riverside Drive. He walked briskly and erectly, wearing with distinction the black fedora he had that morning taken with trepidation out of the dusty hat box on his closet shelf, and the heavy black Saturday coat he had thoroughly whisked clean. Leo also owned a walking stick, a present from a distant relative, but quickly put temptation aside and did not use it. Lily, petite and not unpretty, had on something signifying the approach of spring. She was au courant and
Animatedly.
With all sorts of subjects, and he weighed her words and found her surprisingly sound. Score another for Salzman, whom he uneasily sensed to be somewhere around, hiding perhaps high in a tree along the street, flashing the lady's signals with a pocket mirror, or perhaps a cloven hoof pan, piping nuptial ditties as he danced his invisible way before them, stewing wild buds on the walk and purple grapes in their path, symbolizing fruit of a union, though there was, of course, still none. Lily startled Leo by remarking, I was thinking Mr. Salzman, a curious figure, wouldn't you say? Not certain what to answer, he nodded. She bravely went on blushing. I, for one, am grateful for his introducing us, aren't you? He courteously replied, I am. I mean, she said with a little laugh, and it was all in good taste, or at least gave the effect of being not in bad. Do you mind that we came together so? He was not pleased with her honesty.
Displeased.
He was not displeased with her honesty, recognizing that she meant to set the relationship aright and understanding that it took a certain amount of experience in life and courage to want to do it quite that way. One had to have some sort of past to make that kind of beginning. He said he did not mind. Salzman's function was traditional and honorable, valuable for what it might achieve, which, he pointed out, was frequently nothing. Lily agreed with a sigh. They walked on for a while, and she said after a long silence, again with a nervous laugh, would you mind if I asked you something a little bit personal? Frankly, I find the subject fascinating. Although Leo shrugged, she went on half embarrassedly, how was it that you came to your calling? I mean, was it a sudden, passionate inspiration? Leo, after a time, slowly replied, I was always interested in the law. You saw revealed in it the presence of the highest. He nodded and changed the subject. I understand you spend a little time in Paris, Miss Hirschhorn. Oh, did Mr. Salzman tell you, Rabbi Finkel? Leo winced, but she went on. It was ages ago and almost forgotten. I remember I had to return for my sister's wedding, and Lily would not be put off. When she asked in a trembling voice, did you become enamored with God? He stared at her, then it came to him that she was talking not about Leo Finkel, but a total stranger, some mystical figure, perhaps even passionate prophet that Salzman had dreamed up for her. No relation to.
Whoops, wrong way.
No relation to the living or dead. Leo trembled with rage and weakness. The trickster had obviously sold her a bill of goods, just as he had him, who expected to become acquainted with a young lady of 29, only to behold, the moment he laid eyes upon her strained and anxious face, a woman past 35 and aging rapidly. Only his self-control had kept him this long in her presence. I am not, he said gravely, a talented religious person, and in seeking words to go on, found himself possessed by shame and fear. I think, he said in a strained manner, that I came to God not because I loved him, but because I did not. This confession he spoke harshly because its unexpectedness shook him. Lily wilted. Leo saw a profusion of loaves of bread go flying like ducks high over his head, not unlike the winged loaves by which he had counted himself to sleep last night. Mercifully, then, it snowed, which he would not put past Salzman's machinations. He was infuriated with the marriage broker and swore he would throw him out of the room the minute he reappeared. But Salzman did not come that night, and when Leo's anger had subsided, an unaccountable despair grew in its place. At first, he thought this was caused by his disappointment in Lily, but before long, it became evident that he had involved himself with Salzman without a true knowledge of his own intent. He gradually realized, with an emptiness that seized him with 6 hands, that he had called in the broker to find him a bride because he was incapable of doing it himself. This terrifying insight he had derived as a result of his meeting and conversation with Lily Hirschhorn. Her probing questions had somehow irritated him into revealing to himself more than her the true nature of his relationship to God, and from that it had come upon him with shocking force that apart from his parents, he had never loved anyone. Or perhaps it went the other way, that he did not love God as well as he might, because he had not loved man. It seemed to Leo that his whole life stood starkly revealed, and he saw himself for the first time as he truly was, unloved and loveless. This bitter, but somehow not fully unexpected revelation brought him to a point of panic, controlled only by extraordinary effort. He covered his face with his hands and cried. The week that followed was the worst of his life. He did not eat and lost weight. His beard darkened and grew ragged. He stopped attending seminars and almost never opened a book. He seriously considered leaving the yeshiva, although he was deeply troubled at the thought of the loss of all his years of study, saw them like pages torn from a book strewn over the city, and at the devastating effect of this decision upon his parents. But he had lived without knowledge of himself, and never the 5 books and all the commentaries, mea culpa, and had the truth been revealed to him. He did not know where to turn, and in all this desolating loneliness, there was no to whom, although he often thought of Lily, but not once could he bring himself to go downstairs and make the call. He became touchy and irritable, especially with his landlady, who asked him all manner of personal questions. On the other hand, sensing his own disagreeableness, he waylaid her on the stairs and apologized abjectly, until mortified, she ran from him. Out of this, however, he drew the consolation that he was a Jew and that a Jew suffered. But gradually, as the long and terrible week drew to a close, he regained his composure and some idea of purpose in life, to go on as planned. Although he was imperfect, the ideal was not. As for his request of a bride, he thought of continuing afflicted him with anxiety and heartburn. Yet perhaps with this new knowledge of himself, he would be more stressful than in the past.
Stressful.
Perhaps love would now come to him, and a bride to that love. And for the sanctified seeking, who needed a Salzman? The marriage broke. A skeleton with haunted eyes returned that very night. He looked withal the picture of frustrated expectancy, as if he had steadfastly waited the week at Miss Lily Hirschhorn's side for a telephone call that never came. Casually coughing, Salzman came immediately to the point. So how did you like her? Leo's anger rose, and he could not refrain from chiding the matchmaker. Why did you lie to me, Salzman? Salzman's pale face went dead white. The world had snowed on him. Did you not state that she was 29, Leo insisted. I give you my word. She was 35 of a day, at least 35. Of this, don't be too sure. Her father told me. Never mind. The worst of it was that you lied to her. How did I lie to her? Tell me. You told her things about me that weren't true. You made me out to be more consequently less than I am. She had in mind a totally different person, a sort of semi-mystical wonder rabbi. All I said, you were a religious man. I can imagine. Salzman sighed. This is my weakness that I have, he confessed. My wife says to me, I shouldn't be a salesman, but when I have to find people that they would be wonderful to be married, I am happy that I talk too much, he said wanly. This is why Salzman is a poor man. Leo's anger left him. Well, Salzman, I'm afraid that's all. The marriage broker fastened hungry eyes on him. You don't want any more a bride? I do, but I have decided to seek her in a different way. I am no longer interested in an arranged marriage. To be frank, I now admit the necessity of premarital love. That is, I want to be in love with the one I marry. Love? Said Salzman, astounded. After a moment, he remarked, for us, our love is our life, not for ladies. In the ghetto, I know, said Leo. I've thought of it often. Love, I have said to myself, should be a byproduct of living and worship rather than its own end. Yet for myself, I find it necessary to establish the level of my need and fulfill it. Salzman shrugged, but answered, listen, Rabbi, if you want love, this I can find you also. I have such beautiful clients that you will love them the minute your eyes will see them. Leo smiled unhappily. I'm afraid you don't understand. But Salzman hastily unstrapped his portfolio and withdrew a manila packet from it. Pictures, he said, quickly laying the envelope on the table. Leo called after him to take the pictures away, but as if on the wings of the wind, Salzman had disappeared. March came. Leo had returned to his regular routine. Although he felt not quite himself yet, lacked energy, he was making plans for a more active social life. Of course, it would cost something. But he was an expert in cutting corners, and when there were no corners left, he would make circles rounder. All the while, Salzman's pictures had lain on the table, gathering dust occasionally as Leo sat studying and enjoying a cup of tea. His eyes fell on the manila envelope, but he never opened it. The days went by and no social life to speak of developed with a member of the opposite sex. It was difficult, given the circumstances of his situation. One morning, Leo toiled up the stairs to his room and stared out the window at the city. Although the day was bright, his view of it was dark. For some time, he watched the people in the street below, hurrying along, and then turned with a heavy heart to his little room. On the table was the packet. With a sudden, relentless gesture, he tore it open. For a half hour, he stood by the table in a state of excitement, examining the photographs of the ladies Salzman had included. Finally, with a deep sigh, he put them down. There were 6 of varying degrees of attractiveness, but look at them long enough and they all became Lily Hirschhorn. All past their prime, all starved behind bright smiles, not a true personality in the lot. Life, despite their frantic yoo-hooing, had passed them by. They were pictures in a briefcase that stank of fish. After a while, however, as Leo attempted to return the photographs into the envelope, he found in it another, a snapshot of the type taken by a machine for a quarter. He gazed at it a moment and let out a cry. Her face deeply moved him. Why? He could at first not say. It gave him the impression of youth, spring flowers, yet age, a sense of having been used to the bone, wasted. This came from the eyes, which were hauntingly familiar, yet absolutely strange. He had a vivid impression that he had met her before, but try as he might, he could not place her, although he could almost recall her name, as if he had read it in her own handwriting. No, this couldn't be. He would have remembered. It was not, he affirmed, that she had extraordinary beauty. No, though her face was attractive enough. It was that something about her moved him. Feature for feature, even some of the ladies of the photographs could do better, but she leaped forth to his heart and lived, or wanted to, more than just wanted, perhaps regretted how she had lived, and somehow deeply suffered. It could be seen in the depths of those reluctant eyes, and from the way the light enclosed and shone from her and within her, opening realms of possibilities. This was her own. Her he desired. His head ached, and eyes narrowed with the intensity of his gazing. Then, as if an obscure fog had blown up in the mind, he experienced fear of her and was aware that he had received an impression, somehow, of evil. He shuddered, saying softly, "It is thus with us all." Leo brewed some tea in a small pot and sat sipping it without sugar to calm himself. But before he had finished drinking again, with excitement, he examined the face and found it good. Good for Leo Finkel. Only such a one could understand him and help him seek whatever he was seeking. She might, perhaps, love him. How she had happened to be among the discards in Salzman's barrel, he could never guess, but he knew he must urgently go find her. Leo rushed downstairs, grabbed up the Bronx telephone book, and searched for Salzman's home address. He was not listed, nor was his office. Neither was he in the Manhattan book. But Leo remembered having written down the address on a slip of paper after he had read Salzman's advertisement in the personals column of the forward. He ran up to his room and tore through his papers without luck. It was exasperating. Just when he needed the matchmaker, he was nowhere to be found.
Something happened.
He was nowhere to be found.
I know, but then look at this.
I think the page is cut off.
Yeah.
You scan it?
Yep. All right. Anyway, he found his name.
He found his name and a Bronx address. No phone number was listed. The reason, Leo now recalled, he had originally communicated with Salzman by letter. He got on his coat, put on a hat over his skull cap, and hurried to the subway station. All the way to the far end of the Bronx, he sat on the edge of his seat. He was more than once tempted to take out the picture and see if the girl's face was as he remembered it, but he refrained, allowing the snapshot to remain in his inside coat pocket, content to have her close. When the train pulled into the station, he was waiting at the door and bolted out. He quickly located the street Salzman had advertised. The building he sought was less than a block from the subway, but it was not an office building, nor even a loft, nor a store in which one could rent office space. It was a very old tenement house. Leo found Salzman's name in pencil on a soiled tag under the bell and climbed 3 dark flights to his apartment. When he knocked, the door opened. The door was opened by a thin, asthmatic, gray-haired woman in felt slippers. Yes, she said, expecting nothing. She listened without listening. He could have sworn he had seen her too, before he knew it was an illusion. Salzman, does he live here? Pinay Salzman, the matchmaker. She stared at him a long minute. Of course. He felt embarrassed. Is he in? No. Her mouth, though left open, offered nothing more. No, the matter is urgent. Can you tell me where his office is? In the air, she pointed upward. You mean he has no office? Leo asked. In his socks. He peered into the apartment. It was sunless and dingy. One large room divided by a half-open curtain, beyond which he could see a sagging metal bed. The near side of the room was crowded with rickety chairs, old bureaus, a 3-legged table, racks of cooking utensils, and all the apparatus of a kitchen. But there was no sign of Salzman or his magic barrel, probably also a figment of the imagination. An odor of frying fish made Leo weak to the knees. Where is he? I've got to see your husband. At length she answered. So who knows where he is? Every time he thinks a new thought, he runs to a different place. Go home. He will find you. Tell him Leo Finkel. She gave no sign she had heard.
Okay, apologies. Another line is missing.
Okay. But Salzman, breathless, stood awaiting at his door. Leo was astounded and overjoyed. How did you get here before me? I rushed. Come inside. They entered. Leo fixed tea and a sardine sandwich for Salzman. As they were drinking, he reached behind him for the packet of pictures and handed them to the marriage broker. Salzman put down his glass and said expectantly, you found somebody you like? Not among these. The marriage broker turned away. Here is the one I want. Leo held forth the snapshot. Salzman slipped on his glasses and took the picture into his trembling hand. He turned ghastly and let out a groan. What's the matter? Cried Leo. Excuse me. Was an accident this picture? She isn't for you. Salzman frantically shoved the manila packet in his portfolio. He thrust the snapshot into his pocket and fled down the stairs. Leo, after momentary paralysis, gave chase and courted the marriage broker in the vestibule. The landlady became hysterical, outcries, but neither of them listened. Give me back the picture, Salzman. No, the pain in his eyes was terrible. Tell me who she is then. This I can't tell you. Excuse me? He made to depart, but Leo, forgetting himself, seized the matchmaker by his tight coat and shook him frenziedly. Please, sighed Salzman, please. Leo ashamedly let him go. Tell me who she is, he begged. It's very important for me to know. She is not for you. She is a wild one, wild without shame. This is not a bride for a rabbi. What do you mean wild? Like an animal, like a dog. For her to be poor was a sin. This is why, to me, she is dead now. In God's name, what do you mean? Her I can't introduce to you, Salzman cried. Why are you so excited? Why? He asked. Salzman said, bursting into tears, this is my baby, my Stella. She should burn in hell. Leo hurried up to bed and hid under the covers. Under the covers, he thought his life through. Although he soon fell asleep, he could not sleep her out of his mind. He woke, beating his breast. Though he prayed to be rid of her, his prayers went unanswered. Through days of torment, he endlessly struggled not to love her. Fearing success, he escaped it. He then concluded to convert her to goodness himself, to God. The idea alternatively nauseated him and exalted him. He perhaps did not know that he had come to a final decision until he encountered Salzman in a Broadway cafeteria. He was sitting alone at a rear table, sucking the bony remains of a fish. The marriage broker appeared haggard and transparent to the point of vanishing. Salzman looked up at first, recognizing him.
Without recognizing.
Salzman looked up at first without recognizing him. Leo had grown a pointed beard and his eyes were weighted with wisdom. Salzman, he said, love has at last come to my heart. Who can love from a picture, mocked the marriage broker. It is not impossible. If you can love her, then you can love anybody. Let me show you some new clients that they just sent me their photographs. One is a little doll. Just her I want, Leo murmured. Don't be a fool, doctor. Don't bother with her. Put me in touch with her, Salzman, Leo said humbly. Perhaps I can be of service. Salzman stopped eating and Leo understood with emotion that it was now arranged. Leaving the cafeteria, he was, however, afflicted by a tormenting suspicion that Salzman had planned it all to happen this way. Leo was informed by letter that she would meet him on a certain corner, and she was there one spring night, waiting under a street lamp. He appeared, carrying a small bouquet of violets and rosebuds. Stella stood by the lamppost smoking. She wore white with red shoes, which fitted his expectations, although in a troubled moment, he had imagined the red dress and only the shoes white. She waited uneasily and shyly. From afar, he saw her eyes, clearly her father's. They were filled with desperate innocence. He pictured in her his own redemption. Violins and lit candles revolved in the sky. Leo ran with the flowers outstretched. Around the corner, Salzman, leaning against a wall, chanted prayers for the dead.
That's it.
Okay. Now let's see if I get my people back. Oh, there we go. Thank you for doing that. It's just, the way it is.
So anybody have anything to say about this story?
It'd make a great short little film.
Did it? Did they ever make anything out of it?
Oh, it would make one. I'm thinking of
I
sending
mean,
it.
because they've made movies from Malamud writing, but I
Mhm.
don't know if they made one of this one.
I don't know.
He wrote The Assistant. I don't know if anybody read. I think and I think The Pawnbroker is also his. So that's it. No comments.
I find it interesting. Sorry, Joe. I find it interesting that the father's saying Kaddish for his
What's
daughter.
that all about? What's that
I
about?
don't know.
Well, I do know that I've over the years, like if an Orthodox child marries out of faith or things happen, that parents who are devoutly Orthodox, and I say Orthodox, it could be other, but I assume it's devoutly Orthodox, will say Kaddish for a child because they have left the fold and they've done things that they can't be what the parents can't forgive them for.
So his daughter's going to marry a rabbi, maybe. Is that leaving the fold?
No, it doesn't make sense though. So I don't understand why Salzman was saying Kaddish.
Well, Malamud thought that that he had to put it in. So what's the deal? Is he maybe saying Kaddish for Leo Finkel?
Maybe.
I assumed he was saying Kaddish for his daughter.
Right. That's the first assumption we make. But maybe he's convinced that this is the end. That this is going to be a disaster for Leo Finkel.
Well, she is. The cigarette makes her wild, right? I mean, that's kind of a.
And also a woman smoking, standing under a street lamp.
Street light, yeah. In a red dress.
Well, or right, red shoes actually, right? White. Is it white dress and red shoes? Red dress and white shoes? Yeah, Carol.
But didn't Salzman set up the meet for Leo, for his daughter and Leo to meet? But he's the one who set it up, didn't he?
Well, that's the thing. That's Leo's suspicion that this is really a big roundabout way to finally get his daughter married off or something like that. But maybe.
Then why would he say Kaddish? That doesn't make sense.
Well, it's also not so clear that it was a setup. This is Leo's suspicion. Yeah, Merle, what's up?
I thought that maybe, the daughter's dead to him. So he's saying Kaddish, but, when you're saying Kaddish, forgive me if I say it wrong, but you're saying that even though somebody's dead, God is good. So in a way, it's like praying that something good will happen, even though she's dead to him now. Maybe, moving forward, something good will happen.
What do we make of the whole business here of the matchmaking, setting people up, and then this kind of this question of was this part of the system or was this breaking through the system? What do we make about the struggle? Finkel has this struggle. He sort of says he starts off by saying, "Hey, I can't do this myself, so I'll get a shadchan, I'll get a matchmaker," and then he rebels against the idea, but then he ends up, sort of like feeling that he's powerless to do it. He can't find a way to meet somebody. So there's and then the matchmaker comes back in. So there's that whole frustration there about whether this is a process that makes any sense to begin with. What do we make about his own personal struggle about love and God?
Well, I want to take a little bit of a step to the side a little bit first and just look at the characters, the people. Mm-hmm. So there's some otherworldliness about Salzman. That's a little mysterious. Where's his office? Up there. Or,
that when she says in the air, that's like a Luftmensch is a Yiddish expression, mm-hmm. which means a mensch is a person, right? A man. Mm-hmm. Luft is the air. So a Luftmensch was a person who, when you would ask, how does this guy make a living? He's a Luftmensch. In other words, he lives off the air. Mm-hmm. There's no visible sign of how he actually, operates, to earn money or to support himself and his family. So in a certain sense, that's, she's saying he's completely rootless. Where's his office is in his socks. He that's the other. First she goes to the air, then she goes to his socks. Right?
Means wherever he is.
Wherever he is. That's where that's.
But he's also sort of transparent, and he needs to know some other way when when Finkel needs him.
Right, he's there before Finkel can get home. He's already there.
Right. So there's some edge of.
Right. Maybe he's Elijah the prophet.
I don't know if it's that far, but it's.
Well, that's the way we that's the way we explain these kinds of uncanny coincidences or circumstances. So yeah, what do we in the end, do we feel that is this a happy ending, or is this has love triumphed in the end? Yeah, Carol.
I'm not sure, because it's possible that Salzman's losing his daughter because he's saying Kaddish, or the daughter and Leo do marry and go on, but Salzman doesn't think it's a good match or it's working. It's hard to try to figure out Because at one point I was thinking it was a dream. Because we've had that theme in prior stories. But
I mean, Finkel's an unhappy guy. He's profoundly unhappy.
definitely.
Like nothing seems to, he's sort of aimless. He doesn't know
Yeah, so
why he's doing things. He doesn't know why he wants to be a rabbi. He just sort of follows the rut that's there for him. He doesn't, so this disturbs that.
Yeah.
So to me, it seems like a positive ending because every pot has a lid, you know? It's like, this is maybe the woman for him, even if she's rough, even if she's wild, even if she's whatever, you know, it's what he needs.
Anybody
what-
have, yeah,
but
anybody
what
have
is
a
he-
word to say about Lily Hirschhorn?
Well, she
He's
started
a
the
nice
ball.
person. Leo didn't know what he wanted. He wasn't sure, other than loving his parents, he didn't know what the feeling of love was like. But one of the things that got me is if it was suggested that he'd be easier to find a job as a rabbi with a wife, Salzman's daughter does not strike me as the type to be a rabbi's wife. Because I think when it was writing it, a rabbi's wife, you know, when you hired the rabbi, the wife became the Rebbitzin. I mean, they're not Rebbitzin, rabbis' wives are not Rebbitzins now, but like they were in years ago. So it's hard to compute that he wanted this woman. He was becoming a rabbi. He needed to find a job, but I don't think that Salzman's daughter was the right woman for him to be a rabbi's wife, and that could have been why Salzman was saying Kaddish.
It's the end of the rabbinate for this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
the idea of having some kind of life or living some kind of life or feeling that you're in, bye Beryl.
Bye, Beryl.
So that you're in, you know, in life. You know, Finkel has this you know, sense that he never really know how to live. He never really tasted life. He didn't taste love. And this Stella person, who's apparently Salzman's wayward daughter, you know, she's in a certain sense the polar opposite, right?
Definitely.
And I would suggest that Lily Hirschhorn was also an opposite. You know, something
He started
happened.
the ball rolling.
Right.
for his
She
reevaluation.
was you know, she had been around the block. There's this kind of like hint that she was in France and something didn't quite work out the way it should have, and she had to come back. It was a long time ago, she says. You know, I don't want, you know, she sort of avoids it. I had to come back for my sister's wedding. I had to come back. But you know, there's a question of you know, what ends up getting played out in life. What kind of adventures lead to new adventures, or what kind of adventures become dead ends? And you know, what becomes a step toward fulfillment, and what becomes you know, just a trial and a tribulation. And I don't see any real answers in this thing. The Magic Barrel. That's the name of the story. So what's the function?
And what is that when it's mentioned? I didn't really get it. I didn't really understand the barrel. Right?
The photos, because in the beginning, Salzman said he had a barrel of pictures.
All right, I missed that.
Right. He said I have so many, because first of all, Finkel is disappointed that there's so few for him to choose from. He's only giving him 3 prospective candidates. And he says, that's it? And he goes, are you kidding? At home, I already had so many. I had to get a barrel. I have this you know, they're all in this magic barrel. A little bit like fish in a barrel.
Pickles in a barrel.
Pickles in a barrel, right? But it's magic, right?
Yep.
It's magic. There's a very classic rabbinic teaching, a midrash, that says that after all, God created the world in 7 days. So that's great. So now what does God do? So in the story, I'm making it very simple. A certain rich Roman aristocrat woman, a matrona, a matron, asks one of the rabbis. She goes, according to your, so what's God doing all this time now? Now that God finished working, God worked for 7 days and now he's on pension for the next thousands and thousands of years. What's the deal? So the rabbi's answer is, what does God do? God makes matches. God matches this person with this other person, and it's harder for God to do that than to split the Red Sea. Right? Finding ways to match two people together, to find the right person for the right person. This is God's full-time job since creating the world. And it's the hardest thing that God has tried to do. Splitting the Red Sea is nothing for God. But finding the right two people is the most difficult thing in the world.
How would you, when people set up people on blind dates, is that matchmaking? Because I've met Joe on a blind date.
Right. The person who set you up did a matchmaking kind of function. Yeah, Merle.
Mhm.
And then we have to conclude.
Okay, two quick things. The way I thought the story was going to end, because it's called the Magic Barrel, was that he was going to wind up at the rabbi's house as he did. I mean, the
Matchmaker's house.
matchmaker's house as he did, and that he was going to, let me look in the barrel, I'll find somebody, and that he'd stick his hand in, just for that look, and pull out someone, and he thought she was beautiful, and well, tell me about it, and she's the right age, and that he'd meet her, even if it ended like that, but that he'd meet her and that everything would be happy ever after. One other thing, I noticed that a lot of these stories, and I can't remember them all, but just this week and last week, you're sort of left with, instead of they lived happily ever after, or the bad guy was killed or something, they're left up in the air. You just don't know what's happened.
Right.
Why is that?
It's called modern life. That's what it's called. And with that, we're going to have to conclude.
Okay.
So, Zygusant, everybody.
Bye.
And look
God,
forward to
welcome
the next
back.
time.